When God begins a work in your life, He doesn't always do it in front of an audience. He doesn't always give you a stage, a microphone, or an Instagram following. Sometimes the greatest things He builds in the dark. See, discipline in the dark is not glamorous. It's not celebrated. It doesn't trend. Nobody claps for your sacrifice when nobody sees it. But if you are going to build yourself quietly, you must understand that greatness doesn't start with exposure, it starts with discipline. Discipline is not about being seen, it's about being consistent when no one is watching. It's about getting up early when no one told you to. It's about staying up late to finish what you promised yourself, not what someone else required. It's about learning to say no when your body wants yes, and saying yes when your feelings want no. God often hides you before He reveals you. He takes you into obscurity so that you can grow safely. He puts you in a place where it's just you and your development, you and your struggle, you and your self-control, you and your temptation, because it's in the dark where roots grow deep. Before you see the tree, before you hear the wind rustling in the leaves, before fruit is ever born, it's the root that has to survive, and the root grows in the soil of secrecy. That's where God works. That's where character is formed. That's where grit is developed. That's where you stop depending on the praise of people and start leaning on the promises of God. Let me tell you, if you want the kind of success that lasts, the kind of growth that sustains, you've got to be willing to be disciplined in seasons where there is no recognition. You've got to build habits when there are no rewards. You've got to build routines when there are no trophies, because the reward is not in what they give you, the reward is in who you become. Every time you deny your flesh, you strengthen your spirit. Every time you push through fatigue, you expand your capacity. Every time you choose focus over entertainment, you grow your power. See, discipline is not about the immediate. It's about the ultimate. It's about building a life that can withstand storms because it was forged in silence. Too many people want the platform without the preparation. They want the crown without the cross. But you can't carry greatness if you can't carry yourself. Discipline is carrying yourself even when no one's clapping, even when no one sees the effort, even when your work goes unnoticed. You keep building, you keep praying, you keep studying, you keep sacrificing, because you understand this. I'm not building for applause, I'm building for purpose. There's something holy about building in secret. That's why Jesus, before He ever walked into ministry, went through 30 years of obscurity. 30 years of learning, growing, submitting, practicing, quietly. Nobody saw Him turn water into wine at 12. Nobody saw Him raise the dead at 21. He was waiting, He was training, He was preparing, and then, when the moment came, He was ready because He had been faithful in the unseen places. And I came to tell somebody today, don't curse your quiet season. Don't resent your hiddenness. Don't despise the days of small beginnings. This is where your discipline is forged. This is where the habits that hold your future together are born. This is where you build integrity. Because when you build yourself quietly, you build a foundation that fame can't shake, storms can't break, and critics can't destroy. So wake up early, read the book, exercise your body, control your tongue, guard your mind, be intentional with your time, not because anyone is watching, but because God is watching, because your future is depending on your present discipline. You cannot expect to stand in public if you collapse in private. And if you want to grow silently, you've got to fight the part of you that craves attention. You've got to silence the voice that wants approval before you've even produced fruit. Real discipline is lonely, but loneliness is not your enemy. It's your training ground. It's the place where your spirit learns to listen. It's the place where your heart learns to obey. It's the place where your character is refined and your vision is clarified. This is where builders are born, not in crowds, not in applause, but in silence, in early mornings, in late nights, in surrendered decisions, in self. denial in quiet commitment. So build yourself quietly and watch how God brings you forth publicly. Not because you posted it, not because you promoted it, but because He saw it. He saw you when nobody else did. He saw your tears, He saw your effort, He saw your faithfulness, and in due season He will reward you, not because of your performance, but because of your private discipline. The kind of discipline that builds champions in the dark. The battlefield of your destiny does not begin in the workplace, in the relationships, or even in your circumstances. It begins in your mind. Before the enemy can take your future, he first tries to take your focus. That's why mastering your mindset is one of the most powerful things you can ever do to build yourself quietly. You don't have to announce that you're changing, but you must decide that you're changing. Because everything external is a reflection of the internal. You can't shift your life until you shift your mind. And when I talk about mastering your mindset, I'm not talking about shallow, positive thinking. I'm talking about a deep, spiritual renewing of your thoughts. I'm talking about confronting every lie that has ever been planted in your soul. Every voice that said you're not enough, every echo from the past that told you to settle, every fear that whispers failure. I'm talking about evicting those thoughts and making room for the truth of who God says you are. See, transformation doesn't begin with movement, it begins with mentality. If you think like a victim, you'll live like one, even when freedom is available. If you think small, you'll never reach the opportunities right in front of you. That's why you've got to take authority over your mind. The word says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Not your money, not your circle, not your clothes. Your mind, because you can dress up dysfunction. You can smile over brokenness, but until your mind is renewed, your life will return to the same cycles again and again. You can't pour new wine into old wineskins. That means you can't build a new life with an old mindset. And so many people are praying for new seasons while holding on to toxic thought patterns that are destroying their ability to receive them. Quiet growth starts with internal work. It's not loud, you won't post it. People won't clap for it. But when you begin to rewire your thinking, everything else begins to align. You stop reacting emotionally to everything. You begin to speak life where you used to complain. You start setting boundaries where you used to allow chaos. And little by little, your decisions change because your perspective is maturing. You stop blaming and start building. You stop comparing and start focusing. You stop doubting and start moving in faith. Not because the noise stopped, but because your mind got stronger. Mastering your mindset also means managing what you feed your spirit. You cannot grow in silence if your mind is being polluted by toxic conversations, negative environments, or constant distractions. Every thought you entertain is a seed, and if you keep planting seeds of fear, of jealousy, of resentment, of insecurity, don't be surprised when you reap anxiety, bitterness, or inconsistency. What you water will grow, so guard your gates. Watch what you allow into your ears, your eyes, and your heart. Speak truth over your mind. Replace lies with scripture. Replace fear with faith. Replace shame with grace. This is not just mental discipline, it's spiritual warfare. See, it's easy to look strong on the outside and be falling apart on the inside. That's why you've got to build from the inside out. When you master your mind, you build a fortress of peace that no storm can penetrate. You build a clarity that cuts through confusion. You build a resolve that does not crumble under pressure. It's not that the noise stops, it's that you rise above it. Your mind becomes anchored, and when your mind is anchored, your purpose becomes clearer. I want you to understand something. Your thoughts are not just private whispers, they're building materials. With every thought, you're constructing a life, brick by brick, day by day. What kind of life are you building? A fortress of fear or a temple of strength? A prison of pain or a palace of peace? It's not about what they think of you. It's about what you think about yourself when the room is silent, when the lights are off, when the masks are down. Don't underestimate the power of a changed mind. A changed mind will walk away from what others chase. A changed mind will forgive what others hold on to. A changed mind will wake up with purpose while others hit snooze on destiny. And when you get that kind of focus, when your mind is aligned with your vision, nothing can stop you, not delay, not disappointment, not distraction, because once your mind is right, your steps will follow. So build yourself quietly, not by forcing results, but by renewing your mind daily. Wake up and declare, "This is the day the Lord has made." Speak life into your thoughts. When fear rises, remind yourself, "God has not given me a spirit of fear." When doubt creeps in, speak, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." Because your mouth can shift your mind, and your mind can shape your future. Let the world sleep on you. Let them think you've stopped. You don't need their validation when you've got vision. Just keep building quietly, because one day they'll see the fruit of the internal work. They'll witness the peace you carry, the strength you walk in, the confidence you exude, and they'll ask, "How did you get there?" And you'll smile and say, "I mastered my mindset in silence. I rebuilt my thoughts, and my life followed." You cannot grow if you are constantly distracted. You cannot build yourself if your attention is scattered in 100 different directions. In a world that thrives on noise, urgency, and validation, silence has become a rare treasure. And if you're going to build yourself quietly, you must learn to eliminate the noise and distractions that are stealing your power. Let me tell you, distraction is one of the greatest enemies of destiny. It doesn't have to destroy you loudly. It just has to keep you busy enough that you never focus long enough to build what matters. We live in an age where the moment you decide to grow, 10 other things will rise up to pull you back. You sit down to work and your phone buzzes. You start praying and your mind wanders. You commit to reading or studying and suddenly someone calls, someone texts, someone posts, and your attention is gone. You started with purpose, but ended in procrastination. And here's the truth. You will never see consistent growth if you cannot control your focus. Focus is your spiritual currency. Where your focus goes, your energy flows. And when you allow distractions to dictate your day, you are spending your future on things that do not serve your calling. The enemy knows he can't stop your calling, so he'll try to interrupt your concentration. He'll fill your life with noise, emotional noise, mental clutter, unnecessary conflict, toxic people, self, doubt, and endless scrolling. And you think it's harmless, but it's devouring the hours, the strength, the clarity you need to grow. That's why, if you are serious about building yourself, you've got to be intentional about eliminating distractions. You've got to learn how to say no, not just to others, but to your old self. No to that conversation that takes you off course. No to that mindset that keeps you stuck. No to that activity that feels urgent but adds no value to your purpose. Quiet growth requires deep focus, and focus is not just about time management, it's about mind management. You can't multitask your way to mastery. You can't build anything solid if your soul is fragmented. That's why you've got to be still sometimes. You've got to shut down the noise of the world so you can hear the whisper of purpose. God often speaks in stillness, not in chaos, not in clutter, but in the quiet moments when you're willing to unplug and tune into His voice. I want you to hear me. Your destiny needs your full attention. Your dream deserves your undivided energy. Your growth is not something you can do halfway. If you want to build yourself, you have to discipline your environment. Turn off the phone, close the tab, unfollow the noise. Distance yourself from anything that doesn't align with where you're going. Because every time you get distracted, you're not just losing time. You're losing alignment. There's a difference between being busy and being focused. Being busy means you're doing a lot. Being focused means you're doing the right things. There are people who are busy all day long and yet remain stagnant year after year because they never direct their energy toward what truly matters. They are spinning in circles instead of moving forward. But when you eliminate distractions, when you simplify your life, you begin to find flow, you begin to gain momentum, you begin to hear clearly, think clearly, and move strategically. That's how you build, one focused decision at a time. Let me tell you something else. Distractions aren't always sinful. Sometimes they are simply detours dressed as opportunities. Not every good thing is a God thing. Just because it's popular doesn't mean it's purposeful. Just because it's available doesn't mean it's aligned. That's why discernment is key. You've got to ask yourself daily, is this pulling me closer to who I'm becoming, or is this delaying my progress? Am I investing my energy into what will bear fruit, or am I wasting my energy on things that don't matter in the long run? Quiet builders learn how to subtract before they multiply. They cut off what doesn't serve them so they can pour into what does. They don't chase everything. They choose wisely. They don't speak loudly. They move intentionally. They don't react impulsively. They respond purposefully. Because they've learned that distractions are the enemy of destiny and stillness is the companion of clarity. And let me tell you something powerful. When you remove distractions, you make room for discipline. When you reduce the noise, you increase the depth of your thinking. You begin to access ideas, insights, and revelations that were buried under the clutter. You begin to build habits that are sustainable. You begin to form a rhythm that is rooted in purpose. And the more you protect your focus, the more you protect your future. So if you want to grow, if you want to build something that lasts, you've got to eliminate the noise. Get quiet, get focused, turn your attention to what truly matters. Don't let distraction be the reason you never walked into what God called you to do. Let the world chase chaos. You choose clarity. Let others seek attention. You seek alignment. Because what you build in silence will one day speak louder than anything you could have posted, tweeted, or shouted. And the fruit of focused work will always outlast the noise of shallow distraction. You don't need a platform to elevate. You need preparation. You don't need applause to grow. You need awareness. The truth is, the people who grow the most are not always the loudest in the room. They're not shouting about their progress. They're not posting every move. They're not broadcasting their transformation. Instead, they are committed to a process that nobody sees, the quiet, consistent, private investment into self-education. That's where real growth happens, not in front of cameras, but in front of books, not in the echo of praise, but in the silence of study, not when others are watching, but when you decide to grow, even when no one else is clapping. In this age of constant noise and information overload, it's easy to mistake content consumption for actual growth. People scroll, swipe, like, and repost, but very few are stopping to absorb, reflect, and apply. And if you want to build yourself quietly, you've got to shift from passive consumption to intentional learning. You've got to become your own coach, your own trainer, your own motivator. You've got to decide, if I want more, I have to know more. Not for show, not for status, but for sustainability, because what you know can build you up, or keep you limited. What you learn today determines what you can carry tomorrow. You see, self-education is not about waiting on someone to teach you. It's about recognizing that you are responsible for your development. If you want to grow in a certain area, pick up a book. If you want to succeed in a certain field, study it. If you want to improve your communication, your leadership, your discipline, start learning. Read every day, study purposefully, take notes, watch lectures, listen to wisdom, turn your car into a classroom, make your alone time your advantage, stop scrolling aimlessly and start learning intentionally. There's a reason the Bible says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because ignorance is expensive, not just financially, but emotionally, spiritually, relationally. Every mistake you continue to repeat is rooted in something you don't yet understand. Every opportunity you miss is often connected to something you haven't yet prepared for. That's why self-education is not optional if you're trying to grow. It's essential. It's what separates wishful thinking from winning strategies. You can pray all day long, but if you don't develop your mind, you'll still live beneath your potential. And hear me, this doesn't mean you have to enroll in a university or chase another degree. No, this means you develop a habit of learning. Because learning is not a season, it's a lifestyle. Growth doesn't happen in bursts. It happens in rhythm, and when you commit to feeding your mind daily, you're building something that's not easily shaken. You're filling yourself with tools, insight, and revelation that will guide you through any season. Whether you're in a valley or on a mountaintop, your investment in wisdom becomes your strength. It's also important to know this. What you study determines what you produce. So if you keep consuming gossip, negativity, fear, and shallow content, don't be surprised when your life mirrors that same chaos. But if you start consuming truth, strategy, structure, discipline, and purpose, your life begins to rise. You begin to move differently. You begin to speak with depth. You begin to operate with wisdom. You begin to carry peace, not because the world around you changed, but because the content inside you changed. Self-education also teaches you how to think, not just what to think, but how. In a noisy world, critical thinking is rare. People jump from opinion to opinion, trend to trend, never grounding themselves in truth. But when you read, reflect, and learn, you begin to develop your own discernment. You stop following the crowd and start forging your path. You stop looking for shortcuts and start trusting the process. That's what happens when you quietly commit to growing. You don't just collect facts. You develop wisdom, and I want to speak to someone who feels behind, someone who says, I don't have time, someone who thinks it's too late. Let me tell you, growth doesn't come from age, it comes from awareness. You can start today. You can start with 15 minutes a day. You can grow one page at a time, one chapter at a time, one principle at a time. You don't have to overhaul your life overnight. You just have to start feeding your spirit with what will fuel your future. Let the others chase fame. Let the others post progress. You commit to preparation. Because when the time comes, and it will come, you won't have to fake strength. You won't have to pretend to know. You'll be ready because you've been investing. You'll walk into the room not with arrogance, but with authority. Because you've studied, you've sacrificed, you've shown up for yourself, and that's the power of self-education. It's invisible to the world, but undeniable in your results. You may not see the growth day by day, but over time, the person you're becoming will speak louder than any announcement. And when they finally ask, how did you get here? You'll be able to say with humility and clarity, I built myself in silence. I studied when no one saw. I read when they laughed. I learned when they played, and I invested in wisdom. Because I believed in my future. You don't have to broadcast everything you're building. You don't need to announce every goal, every move, or every shift in your spirit. Growth doesn't need a spotlight to be real. Some of the most powerful transformations happen in silence. And when you understand that, you begin to move differently. You begin to realize that silence isn't weakness. It's strategy, it's wisdom, it's maturity. And if you're truly committed to building yourself, you must let silence become your strategy. See, we live in a culture that worships exposure. People don't just want to succeed. They want to be seen succeeding. They don't just want to grow. They want others to watch them grow. And in the process, they leak their power through premature sharing. They post what they haven't practiced. They speak what they haven't yet secured. They declare what they haven't yet developed. But true strength doesn't need validation. It doesn't need confirmation from the crowd. Because when you're really focused, when you're deeply aligned with your purpose, you realize that progress is personal before it's public. There's a divine reason why seeds are planted in the ground. Not in the open, not on the surface, but buried, covered, hidden, because growth in its purest form happens away from the eyes of others. A seed doesn't announce, "I'm about to sprout." It just does the work. It pulls strength from the soil, it fights through the dirt, it stretches in the dark, and then one day, without warning, it breaks through, not because it was loud, but because it was rooted, not because it was seen, but because it was consistent. That's what happens when you make silence your strategy. When you share too soon, you invite voices that were never meant to be part of your journey. You open the door to opinions, comparisons, discouragement, and distractions. And some of those voices can delay or even destroy what God is trying to do in you. Because instead of focusing on obedience, you start focusing on optics. Instead of walking by faith, you start walking for approval. That's why some of your greatest breakthroughs will require you to be quiet, to be still, to be private, not because you're hiding, but because you're protecting the process. It takes strength to stay silent. It takes confidence to say, "I don't have to tell you what I'm doing. You'll see it when it's done." Because when you're serious about building, you're not distracted by applause. You're not moved by attention. You're not addicted to being seen. You're driven by something deeper, something sacred. You're building for purpose, not performance. You're working not to impress others, but to become who you were called to be. And hear me, there's nothing wrong with celebration, there's nothing wrong with sharing milestones, but let the results speak for you, let the fruit do the talking, let your transformation introduce you. Because when you move in silence, your integrity grows stronger, your vision becomes clearer, your resilience gets tested and proven. You don't need to convince anyone, you don't need to beg for support. You just keep building quietly, faithfully, steadily. Silence also allows you to listen. And when you're building something valuable, whether it's a business, a dream, a habit, or a whole new version of yourself, you need to be listening more than you're talking. Listening to God, listening to your own soul, listening to the lessons, the feedback, the corrections, listening to what needs to change inside you before anything changes around you. You can't do that if you're always announcing. You can't grow that way if you're always trying to explain. Think about Jesus. He healed in silence. He walked in wisdom. He performed miracles and then told people, "Tell no one." Why? Because he wasn't building a brand. He was fulfilling a purpose. And purpose doesn't need promotion. It needs obedience. It needs faithfulness. It needs patience. That same principle applies to you. If you want to build yourself quietly, learn the power of keeping certain things between you and God. Between you and your work, between you and the vision He gave you. Let silence become your discipline. When others brag, you build. When others shout, you sharpen. When others rush, you remain rooted. Because you understand that elevation comes from preparation, not publicity. Growth that lasts is never rushed. It's never noisy. It's developed slowly, deeply, intentionally. So don't be discouraged if no one sees you right now. Don't be frustrated if your progress isn't being applauded. That silence is not empty. It's full of purpose. It's your training ground. It's your refinement season. And when the time is right, your results will speak louder than any announcement ever could. You won't have to explain yourself. You won't have to argue your worth. You won't have to convince anyone, because what you've built in silence will show up with undeniable strength. So, as you walk this journey of building yourself quietly, let me remind you, you don't need noise to grow. You don't need eyes on you to evolve. You don't need applause to become. You just need to commit. Commit to the work that happens when no one is watching. Commit to the decisions that won't get you likes, but will get you closer to purpose. Commit to the process, the private, unseen, uncelebrated process of transformation. Discipline in the dark is where your future is forged. Mind mastery is where your destiny begins. Eliminating the noise isn't about isolation, it's about elevation. Feeding your mind with self-education is not for show, it's for strength. And moving in silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. You don't have to prove anything to anybody. You don't have to announce what you're building. Just build it. Let your focus speak. Let your results speak. Let your character speak. And when the time is right, when the foundation is strong, when the roots are deep, what God has been doing in you privately will show publicly in a way no one can deny. You are becoming quietly, intentionally, powerfully, so keep going. Keep showing up for yourself. Keep planting seeds of discipline, of wisdom, of focus, of faith, because the person you're becoming in silence is the one who will walk boldly into every room you were created to enter. Build yourself quietly, because quiet builders become loud testimonies.